Well, hello, teachers. Here we are in 1 Corinthians 15:32 to 54. What let's do is let me review some of the elements of the lesson, and then I want to re-review, or just review. I suppose review is fine. A principle that we talked about last week, and that is inviting students by name. So if we take a look at this, the activity that we start with is to consider giving a treat to all students who happen to be wearing a certain color. Now, it could be a treat, it could be a gold star, or it could be a compliment. Let's say you forgot to prepare this, you don't have anything, or you're on Zoom. You can give a compliment to each student that's wearing the color. You look nice today, you look nice today, you look nice today. And then talk about the questions here, which is, if you knew there was a prize for wearing a certain color, would that have changed your behavior? The next part is to draw a simple illustration of what you know about the plan of salvation. Now, this can be a great activity to have, especially certain kids who love to draw. It can be something that can involve everyone. If you need some help, or if you're in a situation where a visual would be a better tool, here is a visual that I'll put a link for in the description. This is from the church's website. This works pretty well for a plan of salvation, but in the lesson they want you to have a 3 degrees of glory component to this. Another one that can be useful is in this article from the New Era. I'll also put a link for this in the description of the video. You can click on this. It's not a high resolution image, but it's good enough to help kids to draw if you felt like they could use some help with it. And you may have your own ideas, but I'll offer those. I'm going to offer one other one that you might enjoy, and that's a graphic that I made. It's based on an idea that my son shared with me, and that is the idea of having the 3 degrees of glory as smiley faces. So telestial, terrestrial, and celestial. I'll include a link to that file if anybody wants to use that. That particular topic comes up later in the lesson. So now that you've got some resources to help you with ideas for the plan of salvation drawing, there's some review and talking about a couple of false doctrines, the idea that there's no life after this life, or that everyone will be saved. And then the manual asks this question: how might the false beliefs that there's no life after death, or that God will grant everyone the blessings of eternal life, affect our decisions and attitudes, and why? That is not a question that trips off the tongue. So my recommendation is this is a great place for you to practice inviting students by name. You will have already looked up the scriptures and defined what the false beliefs are. And also, there's a visual component in these call-out boxes. Help students visualize this false belief by erasing everything after mortal life on your drawing on the chalkboard. Or in this case, drawing an arrow from earth life right to celestial kingdom. So they already know the doctrines. So I would offer this. What about saying, how might these false beliefs affect our decisions and attitudes? Pause. If nobody answers, or again, if you have a situation where some people answer too much, and if you want more on this topic, feel free to check out my video last week on 1 Corinthians 12, and we talk in more detail about the Christ-centered principles behind this. But one of the ways that you can help students to feel loved and respected after you've properly prepared them to answer a question is to call on students by name. So, how might these false beliefs affect our decisions and attitudes? Let them think for a minute. And if nobody's answering, Sarah, what do you think? And then you can call on other students to share their thoughts as well. Remember that if a student doesn't know or doesn't have anything to say, they can just say so. All of this leads you into the verses for the doctrinal mastery passage, which you'll talk about just briefly in this lesson, but you'll talk more about the application in the next day's lesson. Notice here that it talks about the degrees of glory. and then give students an opportunity to look up a number of different scriptures and verses to try to understand celestial, terrestrial, and telestial. I'm going to give you this recommendation. One, again, for this image, if you want to use the smiley face for that, you can draw this on the board too. But if your class is, if you feel like this activity will work well, put up all these verses and have the students dig in, maybe even in small groups. But if your students maybe you feel like they wouldn't, that activity might be a little much for them, or even for certain students, my recommendation is to go with a suggestion for, in the call-out box here, to go to Gospel Topics, Kingdoms of Glory. Now you could just hit the link and go there, but let me show you how to get your students there. You'll start with the Gospel Library. Then go to Topics and Questions. And then just scroll down to Kingdoms. That's the only one in K. Kingdoms of Glory. Now here's what's great about this for certain learners. There's a quick overview, but then each one of these is essentially a summarization of the scriptures that were listed in the lesson manual. The scriptures are all referenced right here, but it's an easy to read version of this. Celestial kingdom, terrestrial, telestial. I don't think perdition is on our list, but this might be a really good way to help students that might have a tougher time with the verses to understand the topics that we're talking about here. So that's how to get your students there. And I hope those activities will help you to have a really powerful lesson. What an incredible topic. Paul is spending all of chapter 15 talking about the resurrection and making his case for it, and celebrating why we should be so excited for the blessing that comes through resurrection. I hope you'll have a great time with your students in this lesson.